Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 15th. The lesson two for today on our unit 4th of July isn't very long, and I kind of want to go through it with you. As it says right here, normally this would have been kind of rolled into lesson one, but because I couldn't be in front of you, we'll have to break it up a little bit. So, number one on the agenda says, explain why the unit is called the 4th of July. Well, as I kind of touched upon yesterday, we're not talking about Thomas Jefferson. We're not talking about, Philadelphia, all that stuff. It comes from a speech given by Frederick Douglass back in the 1850s. And Frederick Douglass's speech is, "What to the American slave is the 4th of July?" The meaning behind that is, we have a day, and when you think of 4th of July, what are some words that come to mind? Maybe independence or freedom or liberty. And so what he was doing, he was pointing out the hypocrisy that takes place when you have a day revolving around something like independence, but yet, when he's giving this speech, I believe, right around 1855, there are nearly 4 million American slaves who are in the southern part of the United States. So that's what he's calling attention to. That obviously being a black slave, as Frederick Douglass had been in Maryland as a young man, that every day is terrible, but it's almost extra terrible when you have people with the nerve to celebrate independence and liberty and freedom while they, in their own country, there is slavery, or maybe they even own slaves themselves. So when we look at this unit, that has to do with slavery. But the whole idea of this unit is to look at people in America in the early 1800s who are not doing so well. We've talked a lot about in this class about some of the victories and successes of the country, whether it's the building the Transcontinental Railroad or winning the American Revolution, or doing, not necessarily winning the War of 1812, but definitely doing very well and achieving manifest destiny and winning the war against Mexico in the 1840s. I mean, these are all incredible accomplishments for the United States. But it's important to realize that not everybody was sharing in those successes. So when we look at slaves, when we look at abolitionists, people who are fighting against slavery, when we look at where women's rights was in the early part of the 1800s, when we look what happened to Native Americans, especially in the 1830s, with something called the Trail of Tears. So we're going to look at these different groups to understand that, as I said, they did not share necessarily in the successes that were going on in America in the early 1800s. So those are the 4 different groups that we're going to look at. The other thing I want to do, as I motion down to number 2 here, is to examine the quote from yesterday's clip. So that is, as I said, part of a longer documentary by Ken Burns. And the reason why the section you watched was called All Night Forever is because it ties into this. A quote given by an unnamed freed black man: "No day ever dawns for the slave, nor is it looked for. For the slave, it is all night forever." So when he talks about a day dawning, right? So that's when the sun rises. He's very metaphorical here. He doesn't necessarily mean that. A lot of people look at this and they say, like, oh, that just means slaves have to work all day. Well, while that's true, that's not really the point here. The idea of dawn, when we see the first light, it's more poetic than that. It's talking about, what does light represent? Light represents hope or happiness or something like that. It literally brightens our day. And what he's saying is that that part of the day never comes for the slave. And then the next part of the first line is also heartbreaking. It's "nor is it looked for." So you're living your life in darkness, as the second line gets into. For the slave, it is all night forever. So when you think about, what does nighttime bring? And some of us, maybe that's when better TV shows are on at night, or that's when our homework's done so we can talk to our friends, or maybe that's when we get to sleep or something like that. But when they say night, they're talking about, keep in mind, this is pre-electricity. So they're talking about loneliness, doom, gloomy, depressing, right? The idea of not having light in your life. So when you put the full quote together, no day ever dawns for the slave, right? So they don't have that light, that hope, that happiness in their life, nor is it looked for. So it's getting to a point where it's not even something that you can even hope to experience For the slave, it is all night, forever. And then for part number 3, reflect upon some of the statistics. Even in that 4 minutes, and a lot of it is there's a musical kind of interlude there. How slaves were forced to live was truly amazing, right? They talked about going out into the fields at age 12. Well, I don't know how old all of you are, but I know you're all older than age 12. So think about what your day would be like. 4%, less than 4% of all slaves made it to the age of 60, right? I mean, think so. That's like 1 out of every 25 people would be able to would make it to the age of 60. Your days in the fields, especially if you're working on a plantation, are 12 to 14 hours. Your ability to stay with your family, both your children, your parents, your spouse, that is always up in the air. And then the one image I want to go back to, as you can see it on my screen, is this one right here. I'll just let it play through a little bit. So as you see, this gentleman. So when you look at his leg, right, that's not for medical purposes. That would be locked onto his leg to prevent him from bending his knee. Well, what can you do when you bend your knee? Well, you can kneel, but the other thing you can do is you can run. So by putting that shackle on his leg, he would be unable to run away. And then as you go up, you see the thing that is affixed to his neck. And what you can also notice is that it has 3 prongs. Well, sometimes with a slave who was prone to run away, at the ends of those, they would put bells. And by having 3 of them, you couldn't just simply reach your hand up. You know, if you've ever like put your hand over a bell while it just sort of makes a soft little rattle sound. But obviously, by having 3, no one has 3 arms, so you'd be unable to dull that noise. So anyway, just wanted to explain that image a little bit to you. All right, so one we took care of, explaining why the unit's called the 4th of July, because we're looking at some of the goes back to a Frederick Douglass quote, and we're looking at some groups that did not have share in the American. The full American experience when looking at slaves, abolitionists, people involved in, well, women's rights, and then also Native Americans. We looked at that quote, and then we also, I wanted to reflect on some of the statistics as well as that picture. So your only assignment for the day is to fill in, just to make sure you are listening to the my little lecture here, is to fill in what those 4 groups are. And that is your homework for tomorrow. And don't forget, you also have the documents A, B, C, and D from Tuesday that I gave you. I hope everyone's doing well. Grades are, the tests are being graded pretty much as soon as you turn them in. I think I have maybe like 5 or 6 that I have to do that were turned in on Tuesday. And I hope you guys have a good day. I will chat with you later.